Sometimes the most painful truths are the ones we hide behind our brightest smiles. That's what I told my neighbor Sarah that day on my front porch, the afternoon everything changed between us. If you've ever had someone question your life choices in a way that made you feel less than, this story might resonate with you. Stay with me until the end, I promise it's worth it. If this touches your heart, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more stories that reveal the deeper truths we all carry. I never planned to tell anyone the real reason I remained single at 35. It wasn't something I discussed at family gatherings or neighborhood barbecues. People had their theories, of course. My mother thought I was too picky. My colleagues assumed I was married to my career. My friends joked that I had impossibly high standards. The truth was both simpler and infinitely more complex. Sarah moved in next door 3 years ago with her husband Mark and their 2 children, Emma and Liam. They were the picture-perfect family, the kind that appears on Christmas cards and makes everyone else question their life choices. Sarah had flowing auburn hair that caught the sunlight just right, a laugh that carried across our shared fence, and a warmth that drew people to her naturally. We became friends gradually, the way neighbors sometimes do. A borrowed cup of sugar here, a collected package there. Soon we were having coffee on my deck while her kids played in their backyard. She'd wave to me when I left for work in the morning, and sometimes we'd chat over the fence as I tended to my garden in the evenings. Sarah loved to talk about her family. Her eyes would light up when she described Emma's latest art project or Liam's soccer achievements. She'd share stories about Mark's work promotions and their weekend getaways. I listened and smiled, genuinely happy for her happiness. "You're such a good listener," she told me once. "You'd make someone a wonderful partner." I just smiled and changed the subject. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when everything changed. I was raking leaves in my front yard, enjoying the rhythmic scraping sound against the earth, when Sarah walked over with 2 steaming mugs of apple cider. "Thought you might need a break," she said, handing me one of the mugs. We sat on my porch steps, watching the golden leaves dance in the breeze. The conversation flowed easily as it always did, until Sarah turned to me with that look in her eyes, the one people get when they're about to ask something personal. "Can I ask you something?" she said, cradling her mug between her palms. I nodded, already sensing what was coming. "Why are you still single?" "I mean, you're attractive, successful, kind. I just don't understand why someone hasn't snatched you up yet." The question hung in the air between us. I'd been asked this countless times before, by family members, colleagues, even strangers at weddings. Usually, I'd deflect with a joke or a vague answer about not having met the right person. But something about that day, perhaps the gentle fall light or the comfort of Sarah's friendship, made me want to tell the truth. I took a deep breath and looked out at the falling leaves. 8 years ago, I was engaged, I began, my voice steadier than I expected. Her name was Claire. We met in graduate school and fell in love quickly. She was brilliant, passionate about environmental law, and had this incredible ability to see the good in everyone. Sarah's eyes widened slightly. In all our conversations, I'd never mentioned Claire. We were planning our wedding, nothing extravagant, just something small by the ocean. Claire loved the water. I paused, feeling the familiar tightness in my chest. 3 months before the wedding, she was diagnosed with an aggressive form of brain cancer. The wind picked up, scattering the leaves I'd carefully raked into piles. Neither of us moved to chase them. The doctors gave her 6 months. She lasted 4. My voice cracked slightly. I spent those months by her side in hospital rooms, watching the most vibrant person I'd ever known fade away. We got married in the hospital chapel 2 weeks before she died. She wanted to be my wife, even if just for a little while. Sarah's hand found mine, squeezing gently. "The thing is, Sarah, I'm not single because I haven't found the right person. I'm single because I found her, loved her with everything I had, and lost her. And I'm not sure I have it in me to do that again." I looked at Sarah then, expecting to see pity in her eyes. Instead, I saw tears streaming down her face. She wasn't looking at me with sympathy, she was broken open by the rawness of my truth. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I had no idea." "How could you have known? It's not something I talk about. But I've been so insensitive, always going on about my perfect life, pushing you about dating." I shook my head. "Your happiness isn't an affront to my loss, Sarah. I genuinely love seeing you with your family. It reminds me that love exists in the world, even if mine took a different path." We sat in silence for a while, watching the neighborhood children chase each other through piles of leaves. The afternoon light was fading, casting long shadows across my lawn. "Can you tell me about her?" Sarah finally asked. About Claire? No one had asked me that in years. People usually changed the subject quickly when they learned about my loss, uncomfortable with grief they couldn't fix. But Sarah wanted to know Claire, to understand the love that had shaped me. So I told her. I told her about Claire's passion for justice, how she once spent 3 days straight preparing for a case that would protect a local wetland from development. I told her about Claire's terrible singing voice and how she would belt out Whitney Houston songs in the shower anyway. I told her about our first date at a hole-in-the-wall Thai restaurant where we talked until the owner had to ask us to leave because they were closing. As I spoke, Claire came alive between us. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of her absence not as a crushing burden but as a precious gift I could share. "She sounds extraordinary," Sarah said when I finally fell silent. She was. The next day, Sarah brought over a potted plant, a peace lily with delicate white blooms. "Claire loved nature, right? I thought maybe you could have this as a living reminder." It was such a simple gesture, but it moved me deeply. Sarah hadn't tried to fix my grief or push me to move on. She had simply acknowledged my love for Claire as real and ongoing. In the weeks that followed, something shifted in our friendship. Sarah stopped making comments about setting me up with her single friends. Instead, she invited me to family dinners, included me in holiday celebrations, and sometimes just sat with me in comfortable silence on the porch. One evening, as we watched her children playing tag in the yard, Sarah turned to me. "You know, I've been thinking about what you said that day. About finding the right person and losing them." I nodded, wondering where she was going with this. I realized I've been living with this unconscious belief that if I did everything right, if I found the perfect partner, built the perfect home, raised perfect children, I could somehow guarantee my happiness. Like I could ward off loss if I just checked all the right boxes. She looked out at Mark, who was pretending to be a monster chasing Emma and Liam. "But that's not how it works, is it? You and Claire did everything right. You found each other, you loved each other, you committed to each other. And still, life happened," I finished for her. "Exactly. Life happened." She turned back to me. "Your story scared me at first because it challenged my illusion of control. But now I think it's actually freed me in a way. It's reminded me to cherish what I have while I have it, because nothing is guaranteed. I hadn't expected this, that my loss could be a gift to someone else. That my broken heart could help another person love more fully." As the seasons changed, Sarah and I grew closer. She introduced me to other neighbors not as her single friend, but simply as her friend. Sometimes she would mention Claire naturally in conversation, keeping her memory alive in a way that felt healing rather than painful. Gradually, I found myself opening up to others as well. I mentioned Claire to colleagues when it felt relevant. I put a photo of us back on my desk. I visited her grave with flowers on her birthday instead of pretending it was just another day. One spring morning, Sarah knocked on my door with a flyer in hand. "There's a charity walk for brain cancer research next month," she said. I thought maybe we could participate. For Claire. The old me would have declined, finding it too painful. But something had changed. "I'd like that," I said. Claire would have been the first to sign up. We created a team called Claire's Light and invited others to join. To my surprise, many did, colleagues I'd barely spoken to, neighbors I only knew in passing, even my elderly mother who insisted she could manage the whole 5K route. On the day of the walk, I stood surrounded by people wearing t-shirts with Claire's name, many of whom had never met her. Sarah had organized everything, from the team shirts to the fundraising page that had already exceeded our goal 3 times over. As we prepared to start, Sarah handed me something, a small locket with a tiny photograph of Claire inside. Mark helped me resize the photo from the one on your mantle, she explained. I thought you might want to carry her with you today. I fastened the locket around my neck, too moved to speak. We walked together under a perfect blue sky, sometimes talking, sometimes quiet. At one point, Sarah's daughter Emma slipped her small hand into mine. Mom says your special person is watching from heaven, she said matter-of-factly. Do you think she's proud of you? The question caught me off guard, but I found myself smiling through tears. I hope so, Emma. I really hope so. As we crossed the finish line together, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, a sense of possibility. Not that I would ever replace Claire or forget what we had, but that perhaps my heart had more capacity than I'd given it credit for. That maybe loving once and losing didn't have to be the end of my story. That evening, as the sun set over our neighborhood, Sarah and I sat on my porch swing. Thank you, I said simply. For what? For asking that question that day. For not being satisfied with my deflections. For wanting to know the real me. She smiled. Thank you for trusting me with your truth. We rocked gently in the fading light, comfortable in our shared understanding. You know, Sarah said after a while, being single doesn't mean you're alone. You have a community that loves you. You have us. I know that now, I replied. And I did. 6 months later, I met someone at a fundraising event for the cancer center where Claire had been treated. Her name was Elise, and she had lost her brother to the same disease. We connected over our shared experiences of loss, but also over our love of classic films and hiking trails. Our relationship developed slowly, cautiously. I told her about Claire on our second date, unwilling to hide such an important part of myself. To my relief, Elise understood. She didn't feel threatened by my past love, instead, she honored it as part of who I was. The first time I invited Elise to dinner at my home, I was nervous about introducing her to Sarah and her family. I needn't have worried. Sarah welcomed her warmly, and by the end of the evening, they were exchanging phone numbers and making plans to meet for coffee. As Elise and I walked back to my house after dinner, she squeezed my hand. Sarah is wonderful, she said. I can see why you care about her so much. She asked me once why I was still single, I told Elise. My answer broke her heart, but somehow, in breaking, it made room for something new to grow. Elise nodded, understanding. Sometimes we need to break before we can heal. I looked up at the night sky, at the countless stars shining above us. Somewhere among them, I like to think, Claire was watching. Not with jealousy or sadness, but with the same generous love she had always shown in life. I used to think that grief was the price of love, I said quietly. And it is, in a way. But what I didn't understand was that love is also the reward for grief. That by fully feeling the loss, I was honoring what we had. And eventually, that made it possible to love again. Elise leaned her head against my shoulder. That's beautiful. It's true, I said. And I wouldn't have understood it if Sarah hadn't asked me that question on my porch that day. 2 years after that conversation with Sarah, I proposed to Elise on the beach, the same beach where Claire and I had once planned to marry. It wasn't about replacing one love with another, but about honoring my past while embracing my future. When I told Sarah about the engagement, she hugged me tightly. Claire would be so happy for you, she whispered. How do you know? I asked. You never met her. Sarah smiled. Because I know you. And you wouldn't have loved someone who wouldn't want you to find joy again. She was right, of course. Claire had made me promise, in those final days in the hospital, that I wouldn't close my heart forever. At the time, I couldn't imagine ever loving anyone else. But Claire had known better. She had known that hearts can expand in ways we never expect. At our wedding, we left an empty chair in the front row with a single white lily on it, a quiet acknowledgement of Claire's place in our story. Elise had suggested it, understanding that my love for Claire wasn't a threat but a testament to my capacity for devotion. Sarah was there with her family, beaming with pride and joy. After the ceremony, she found me for a moment alone. Remember when I asked you why you were still single, she said. I nodded, smiling at the memory that had once been painful but now felt like the beginning of a healing journey. I thought I was just making conversation, Sarah continued. I had no idea that question would change both our lives. How did it change yours? I asked, curious. It made me realize that behind every person's life choices are stories we can't see from the outside. It taught me to ask deeper questions and really listen to the answers. It showed me that true friendship means making space for someone's whole truth, not just the parts that are easy to hear. I hugged her then, grateful beyond words for the neighbor who had become family. As Elise and I drove away from our wedding reception, rice still caught in our hair and laughter lingering on our lips, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. From the devastating loss of Claire to the unexpected friendship with Sarah to the beautiful beginning with Elise. None of it would have happened if I hadn't finally answered honestly when my neighbor asked, "Why are you still single?" Sometimes the questions that break us open are the very ones that let the light in. If this story touched you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. We all carry untold stories within us, stories of love and loss, of breaking and healing. By sharing them, we remind each other that we're not alone in our human experience. That even in our most private pain, connection is possible. That sometimes, the most honest answer to a simple question can change everything.